Hello and welcome to London Guided Walks podcast. In the coming episodes, we will be sharing our love and passion for London, its people, places and history in an espresso shot with a splash of personality. For those of you who don't know me, I am Hazel Baker, founder of LondonGuidedWalks.co.uk, providing guided walks, private tours and treasure hunts to Londoners and visitors alike, and now bringing you a jam-packed podcast during the time of the coronavirus. Joining me today in the studio is Vanessa Woolf from London Dreamtime. She's a professional storyteller who's inspired by the history and folklore of London. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, this is just a pleasure. I'm very excited.
I'm excited too, because I want to know more. I mean, we're both in professions where storytelling is at the heart of what we do.
Yeah.
And it's obvious to me why it's so important. But for you, why is it?
It's the foundation of how we understand the world. So when we're looking back on our own life, we make narratives about the people who we know and about ourselves. And if you think about your life, you've always got the kind of old grandparents who reel out the same old stories again and again. And that's how you understand your own life. So our whole life and our whole thought is all structured around stories. And a city like London is basically, you may say it's built of bricks, but it's not really. It's made of millions and millions of stories.
Go on then, such as what?
Oh my gosh. Well, so there's everybody's personal stories, of course. And everyone who lives in London has got their own personal stories, and I've got like a million things that I've got that have happened to me that have also happened to other people. So all our stories are interlinking. And then there's the bigger stories, the political stories, all the kind of stories of, I don't know, kings and queens and politicians and lords and ladies and great inventors and all those kinds of true stories. And then there's the almost true stories or the nearly true stories or the stories that are true from one point of view or another. And then there's the ghost stories and the mythology and the folklore and the legends, things like the Hackney Marshes Bear.
The Hackney Marshes Bear?
The Hackney Marshes Bear, yes, that's right. So
I've heard of the Hackney Marshes Dragon, but not the bear.
Oh. Well, last year I was asked to do some Walthamstow storytelling for a fantastic art project. And we invited, what they basically did, which is very relevant to what we're talking about, is they just went out into the community, these two artists called Hewing Whittair, and they collected stories from the community, from like stories about people's birthdays or people who they'd lost or, really personal things, little making fairy dens, to much bigger stories about the local area. And one of them was the Hackney Marshes Bear. And they said, would you like to tell this story? There's these boys in the 1980s who went out in the snow to play football onto the marshes, and they saw this bear. And they were absolutely terrified. So they saw this enormous bear and they found footprints. They came running home. They were completely freaking out. Their parents called the police, and the police cordoned off the entire of Hackney Marshes. They sent like absolutely tons of police officers to go and find this live bear.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that the police had taken it so seriously was that a few months earlier, 2 corpses of skinned bears had actually been found in the river. And they don't know why there were these 2 corpses of skinned bears in the river. They've got theories, that these are bears that have run away from the circus, or these are rival taxidermists, or all kinds of crazy ideas. But anyway, and then later on, obviously they didn't find a bear. Who was it? Well, I think it was a drummer from Kula Shaker released a video that him and his girlfriend had taken of this wild animal that looked very shaggy in the marshes, and they said this was another sighting. That was in 2012, but it actually turned out to be someone's very large dog. Anyway, so that's just like, those are stories which people like to believe. People love a good story.
Yeah,
absolutely love it. Like the Highgate Vampire, that's a classic example. People love to believe that story.
Go on then.
Oh, well, the story is simply that when Highgate Cemetery was first built, one of the first coffins that was interred in there was that of a nobleman from Wallachia who had been put in the Bear Mausoleum and was escaping and going and finding beautiful girls and biting their necks. And then they would sleepwalk into the cemetery. And then Bishop Sean Manchester, had come and basically tracked this vampire down to a house in Finsbury Park, where he opened the coffin, Bishop Sean Manchester says, in this house in Finsbury Park in 1973, saw this vampire, decided to cut off its head with a gravedigger's shovel, which he did, cut off the head. Immediately, this vampire turned into a gigantic spider and attacked him. And he fought it to death with a shovel. And that was the end of the Highgate Vampire. So that's his story. So David Farrant, he was the president of the British Psychic and Occult Society. And his version of the story was that actually it wasn't a vampire, it was a ghost, an 8-foot high ghost with glowing eyes. Anyway, the point is, he basically said that Sean Manchester was lying about everything and only what he said was true. And Sean Manchester said that David Farrant was lying about everything. And people strongly believe these stories.
And what else?
The Brompton Cemetery time machine. So you may be familiar with the concept that there is the Hannah Courtoy Mausoleum in the middle of Brompton Cemetery, was designed by Samuel Warner, the inventor, and Joseph Bonamy, the architect and Egyptologist. And it is, in fact, a working time machine or possibly a teleport. So that's the legend. I worked with Stephen Coates, who's a cult researcher and a musician. And we came up with the story and we told it at midnight in the cemetery and everybody came along and I thought it was great fun. And I have to say at the end, I don't think I'm breaking any confidences here to say I was a little bit surprised by the very serious way that some people did take it. Like, they were asking me a lot of details afterwards about, how it could work and can we get it open and could you get a key this way or this way or this way? And, to me, I love these stories and I enter into them completely when I'm telling them. However, there is a little bit of me that keeps my distance as well. I can't believe every story that I tell, although I do believe them when I tell them, I do believe them. But as soon as I finish telling them, I go back into, I guess, the real world.
Yeah, I completely get where you're coming from on that one. I have similar feelings when I'm doing ghost stories.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
they're not my stories.
Yeah.
And then I'm coming back to the vampire. I was researching a tour about the paranormal activity in the West End.
Yeah.
And I found the first ever registered vampire attack in London. That was in 1913 on Coventry Street.
Wow, Coventry Street. How very interesting.
Yeah, so a busy place linking Piccadilly Circus and Leicester Square, and that was where the first attack was.
Wow. Yeah, I do think it's interesting, the way these things come in waves. So, you get people get very kind of hysterical about vampires or something like that for a while, or something like Spring-Heeled Jack, which is an interesting one, isn't it? It was like for a while, everyone was like, they were seeing Spring-Heeled Jack everywhere. And then the next thing, they were onto the next thing.
Yeah.
As it were. And I think, with vampires, it's a bit like UFOs, isn't it? So people see UFOs. There's a sort of time for seeing UFOs, which I think was perhaps in the 1950s and early 60s. And then there was another sort of wave in the 90s when everyone was interested in kind of the X-Files and crop circles and things like that. And everybody started to see UFOs again. And now it seems to have kind of gone out of fashion and people have got other explanations for these weird things. I do think there are things out there, weird things out there. I do think that I have had a couple of experiences myself, including one extremely scary one in Highgate Cemetery, genuinely scary, that does make me hesitant to just dismiss the whole notion of the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of very scary things, but I wouldn't, on the other hand, I don't kind of just buy into everything wholesale.
No. But as you said, you've got to put yourself in a place in order to tell the story and to
Exactly.
make it believable.
Yeah.
That maybe people take it a little bit too far sometimes.
Yeah, I guess
Receive.
so. But I kind of like that too. I love it when I feel that people are really entering into it, because what that means is they've gone on a journey with me.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of being a storyteller. I always imagine the stories, let's say a story lasts half an hour or 40 minutes. And during that time, it's like taking someone or perhaps the audience with you on a journey. I feel like a Sherpa going up a mountain of unmarked track. And because I've told the story before, I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I take people, I show them this place, take them here, take them there. And they are all imagining the story along with me. So they're all picturing it in their heads. And people say things like, oh, I could really hear the crackling of the campfire, or, I could feel those cold winds blowing, or, whatever it is. I could really, see him on his horse or whatever. And that's when you feel like you've really made something magical, because storytelling is supposed to be magical, I think. And when people really enter into it in their imaginations, then you've done something magical. You've transported them. And when when somebody says to me, I'd really be interested in hearing a bit more about some character in your story, that's a great tribute to the power of the imagination. You've taken them with you on the journey.
Yep. It's easier to remember, isn't it, as well? With stories, there's the
Absolutely.
setup, there's the suspense, there's the cause and effect. A lot easier to remember.
Yeah.
I have the same sort of thing with doing the tour guiding. I basically have 3 minutes at a stop to get my information in. And the easiest way, especially if that information is going to be beneficial for the next stop or whatever, to link, knowledge, overlay those knowledge.
Yeah.
It's easier for people to see. And sometimes I see in their eyes something just click.
Mm.
And they've just taken what I've said maybe half an hour ago, and now with this extra bit of information, that magic in that moment has been made.
Yeah.
And
planting the seeds.
Yes,
That's what it is.
Exactly. And that just gives me goosebumps when I see that happen.
Great.
I go, yes,
I know.
I've done it. Yeah, I mean, Rudyard Kipling, he said that if history were taught in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten.
Yeah, and that is a very interesting thing, because, of course, the trouble with history is that it isn't just one person's perspective. So a story, generally speaking, you will be, in fact, I think it's impossible for you not to give a perspective on the history. So you're not an impartial observer when you're having a story. And actually, I completely agree. And, I'm actually do get asked to go into schools and do historical storytelling, which I do and I love. But I do think that you have to be very careful using storytelling for history, don't you? Because and some people seem to think that storytelling is impartial, but actually it's the exact opposite of impartial. It's exactly the opposite of impartial.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you think of maybe the Odyssey, I mean, that's written or was created through the eyes of Odysseus.
Absolutely.
Who was a silver-tongued, literate. So had it been someone else, it would have been a very different story, and maybe he'd have got a home in 18 months, not 10 years.
Well, yes, and even more than that, if you think about the people who actually wrote it, who were men. So I've been telling some Greek myths recently, and I've been very influenced by hearing about the position of women in ancient Greek society, which was basically they were pretty much slaves.
Yep, they were.
Married women, just, they had to put up with so much appalling rubbish. They had to put up with so much awful stuff. And, that was just completely taken for granted. The idea that women could say anything, have public life, become, rule anywhere, have any power, was ridiculous. And so when you look at the ancient Greek myths, remembering that it was an incredibly male-dominated voice. So it was much more than even, say, medieval stories or, kind of Victorian stories. This came from a society where women were considered to be pretty much worthless. And it really casts a new light on something like Clytemnestra, where you've got,
Yeah,
the angry
absolutely.
woman, or, Goddess Hera, who's she's the queen of wives, and she's permanently angry. And, because wives just had the most absolutely worst time ever out of anyone in the whole of Greek society, apart from the kind of most miserable slaves. So anyway, yes.
Absolutely. I mean, you can understand why Antigone goes off on one, because of all of that oppression.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And especially when you have the difference between Greek women were viewed basically as slaves, no opinion, and then you had Roman women, very, very different. As long as you're upper levels of society, you had so much more freedom.
Yeah, absolutely right. So yeah, I do think it's very interesting who tells the stories. And that's one of the reasons that I'm very interested in promoting storytellers from diverse backgrounds. So, as well as my own storytelling, I try and put on events where I try my best to create a platform for people who come from groups, whatever, whose voices are not perhaps getting heard as much as they need to. So, that's another thing that I'm interested in too. So, I just think storytelling is so important.
No, it is, absolutely. And you do some with the Victorian Magic Lantern, don't you?
Yes. So I'm doing that for our latest online event, which is on Sunday. And the Victorian Magic Lantern has been in George's family ever since it was made. And we've got a huge selection of glass slides. And I've been using it kind of sporadically for work. So I did some at Kensington Palace for their Christmas. They had a Christmas sort of advent calendar, and I bought the magic lantern in for them then, because apparently I think it was Queen Victoria, when she was a little girl, she used to love the magic lantern. So they wanted stories with the magic lantern, which was really fun. And, kind of other smaller museums like the Florence Nightingale Museum and the Cooming Museum and things like that.
That's all from us for now. Don't forget to visit londonguidedwalks.co.uk/podcast for more detailed show notes, including photos, blog posts, and recommended reading. Now, we do have some exciting news to share with you this time, and that is that we are now doing live London quizzes every Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the evening, London, UK time. So if you think you know London, then this is your chance to prove it, my friend. Go to londonguidedwalks.co.uk and select Live London Quiz. Tickets are available online and they are per household/team. So I hope to see you there. Now, you can support this podcast by subscribing. That means the absolute world to me, really, it does. And thank you so much for all your wonderful emails of suggestions of what we can do in the future. They are all on the list and we're ticking them off one by one. And also, if you are enjoying this podcast, then please do consider leaving a 5-star review on the platform of your choice. And many thanks in advance.